I never imagined that the day I was meant to honor as sacred, my wedding day, would instead become the day that shattered me. But it did. And the person who destroyed that day wasn't my fiancé. It was someone I'd lived under the same roof with since childhood. Someone my mother believed in and fed every evening. Someone who sat at our family dinners wearing a smile, while plotting the downfall of her own child. Someone I called brother, someone I trusted, someone I had adored like a hero. Yet behind that mask lurked a wolf in my home. And that wolf struck on the very day I was supposed to step into my new life as a wife. You're probably thinking, how could someone betray you like that? How could it happen in a house you thought was safe? How do you live through that? I'm going to tell you. But first, before we get deeper into my story, please subscribe now to the channel so that even when the pain is hard to hear, the voices of women who survived will always have a space here. I was born in 1952 in a quiet coastal town in North Carolina. The sea breeze, the salt air, the smell of pine trees, these were the things that shaped how I saw the world. My given name is Eleanor, though many call me Grandma Ella now. I live alone in a small cottage by the marsh, where the water laps gently against the wooden pilings each dawn. It is there, in the gentle hush of morning, the humming of cicadas, and the memory of possibility, that I look back on what happened to me decades ago. My father, Mr. Thomas Reeves, was a modest shipwright, strong and silent. He had rough hands, but a gentle heart. He believed in honesty and hard work, teaching us that reputation was everything. My mother, Mary Reeves, was a seamstress, delicate yet fierce, who used to sew dresses long into the night by lamplight. She taught me about dignity, propriety, and the dangers of making people talk. A woman's honor is her fortress, she'd say. Little did she know how fragile that fortress truly was. I was the youngest of 5 children, only girl, and my parents' darling. My brothers, Samuel, Henry, and Lucas, older by many years. But there was one brother in particular I believed in, David. He was 7 years older than me, tall and handsome, and everyone admired him. In our neighborhood, he was the golden boy. Smart, polite, helpful, always ready to open a door or lend a hand. I adored him. When I was a child, if I scraped my knee, he'd carry me to the porch and wrap his jacket around me. If bullies teased me at school, he'd march up to them and insist they leave me alone. He was my knight. Because of him, I felt safe. Because of him, I believed that family was impregnable, that there was no betrayal possible under that roof. I thought he existed to protect me, to be my shield in a dangerous world. How tragically wrong I was. As I grew, life followed the rhythm of small-town propriety. Dates were chaperoned, letters passed through my mother, young men were introduced politely. I had never been alone with a man until I was engaged. Those were the rules. That was who I was. That was who I believed I must be. When I turned 24, my parents began to worry quietly. A girl of 24, still unwed, raised eyebrows. Rumors murmured among the fine ladies of town. Eleanor Reeves is too picky, they said. Too proud. And my heart suffered those whispers. Yet I never questioned the protections built around me. I accepted them as love. Then came William Carrington. He was a schoolteacher, kind and steady, from a respectable family. He wrote me letters full of gentleness. In public, he called me my promise. My parents approved. I agreed. My heart believed him. And more than anything, I wanted to become Mrs. Carrington, to step into a life of warmth, security, and love. Who would have imagined that the greatest danger wasn't from the strangers outside, but from those I called my own? One evening, after William had formally asked for my hand, it was David who stood before my parents and declared his blessing. "He's good for Eleanor," he said. My heart fluttered with gratitude. He said, "I will always protect her." I believed him. Engagements were formal, but in our household, hands were guided and approval matters weighed heavily. 4 months, we planned: the venue, the dress, the vows, the invitation list, the flowers. My mother labored over the wedding gown by lamplight. My father fussed over logistics. David was present at every step, offering advice, smiling benevolently, being the gracious older brother. Everyone said what a proud big brother he was. I believed him completely. The day before the wedding, the town buzzed with excitement. Neighbors visited to offer congratulations. Relatives traveled by train and car. In my bedroom that night, I lay awake, the white lace of my gown draped across a chair, imagining the walk down the aisle, the music, the vows, the promise of love, the bright future. I smelled the scent of lavender and fresh linen, felt the faint tremor of excitement in my belly. Morning came fair and bright, with sunlight streaming through the curtains. The birds sang as if heralding a perfect day. I bathed slowly, letting the warm water trickle over my skin, thinking of the life I would step into. My gown hung pristine. All was calm. In that moment, I believed that nothing could go wrong. Then there came a knock. 3 soft but insistent knocks. My heart fluttered. It was David, saying he had something urgent to share before the ceremony. His voice sounded tight, anxious. He asked me to step into the little parlor by the stairs. I thought, he must have found something about William the First should know. I slipped on a robe over my undergarments and followed him. We entered the small room. He closed the door behind us gently, but then, almost instantly, he locked it from inside. The sound of the bolt sliding into place cracked through my heart like glass. My breath caught. A chill entered my spirit. "David, what are you doing? Why the lock?" I asked, voice trembling, not yet comprehending the danger. He turned slowly, too slowly, with a posture that no brother should ever hold. His eyes, there it was, what no sibling should ever carry. A feral gleam, a lust beyond love, a betrayal beyond comprehension. The look of a predator. And in that instant, I knew. I had made the worst mistake of my life. The walls around me shifted. The floor under me trembled. That safe home, that family, that trusted brother, all illusions. He advanced as though he'd rehearsed this moment for years. He whispered something to hush my fear, some sick excuse, then forced himself upon me. What followed cannot be fully rendered in words. It was violation, betrayal, desolation. When he left the room as if nothing had happened, adjusting his shirt, smoothing a crease, that cold calm in his eyes, my soul felt as though it were being shredded. He turned and said, "You will walk down that aisle as if you alone woke up dreaming. If you tell anyone, I will say you seduced me. Who would believe you over me, the respected son, the admired man?" Those words stained my spirit. Not only had he destroyed me physically, he sought to murder my dignity, my voice. I stood there, trembling, heart pounding, the lace of my slip ragged, tears smudging my makeup, shadows of pain and shame casting themselves across my chest. Outside, the house bustled with normalcy. Voices in the hallway, greetings in the parlor, the sound of footsteps, the joy of a wedding morning. It was as if the world outside continued while my world collapsed. I forced myself upright. I washed my face. I pressed shawls to my limbs, tried to still my breathing, mask the horror. They knocked on the parlor door. "Eleanor, we're ready," said my mother. My voice cracked, almost foreign, as I said, "Just a moment." I stepped into my gown, every stitch of it feeling like a noose. I looked at myself in the mirror and could scarcely recognize the bridal image. There, in my eyes, something had died. I walked the hallway to the front door. Neighbors watched, some offering smiles, some nodding with expectation. I carried a grief behind my eyes they could not see. I went to the church, surrounded by white roses and stiff pews, the flickering candles, the organ to play the prelude. I approached the altar, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. William stood there, confident, trusting, innocent of pain. My father offered a trembling arm. The priest spoke of sacred love. The congregation watched with kind faces. But inside me I was rent in two, the bride I was meant to be, and the girl in that parlor who had just survived a betrayal. When the words, "If anyone knows of any impediment," echoed, something inside me roared. That was the moment. The moment the silence ended. The moment truth demanded its day. The moment that would divide my life forever. There I stood at the altar, with the veil trembling on my head and my hands locked in William's. His fingers were warm, steady, and yet, I felt colder than I ever had in my life. The priest's words had barely finished ringing through the rafters of the chapel when my lips parted, and I knew I couldn't hold it in. I couldn't fake my way through this ceremony. I couldn't let this dress become the costume for my silence. I have something to say, I heard myself say. My voice was so faint I wasn't sure it had even left my throat. But somehow, the entire church went quiet. The organist stopped. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I turned to the congregation, and for a moment, I saw them not as faces, but as a tide. Some would wash over me gently. Others, I feared, would crash down like a storm. But I was already sinking. And when you're drowning, you either scream or disappear. My brother, I said, David Reeves, did something to me this morning. Something unspeakable. A murmur swept the room like wind rustling a wheat field. Gasps. Whispers. My mother stood up in her pew. William gripped my hand tighter, confused, protective. But I had to keep going. I was in the parlor getting ready. He came to me. Said he needed to speak in private about William. I believed him. He's my brother. I trusted him. But once I was alone with him, he locked the door. And my knees nearly buckled. For a second I thought I'd fall right there in front of the pulpit. But William's hand held me steady. I looked at the priest, his face stricken with shock. I looked at the crowd, dozens of people frozen in their seats, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. I swallowed hard and said the truth. David assaulted me in that room. Violated me. Told me no one would believe me. That I would ruin everything if I spoke. But I cannot get married like this. Not with this secret. Not with this pain in my chest like a knife. The uproar that followed, I don't have words for it. It was as if lightning had struck inside the church. People stood, cried, shouted. Some screamed David's name. Some looked at me like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Others began looking for him in the pews. He wasn't in his seat anymore. That devil, that coward, had slipped away during the ceremony. Perhaps he had sensed I might speak. Or maybe deep down, he knew his time hiding behind his good name had come to an end. The priest tried to calm everyone. William led me gently from the altar down to the front pew where I sat trembling. My father sat as if carved in stone, eyes forward, unmoving. My mother, her hands shaking, finally made her way to me. She knelt beside me, whispered, "Is it true?" I nodded once. I couldn't speak. And she cried. Loud, uncontrollably. A cry of someone whose world had cracked right down the center. Because how does a mother reconcile a daughter's pain with a son's sin? Outside, some of the men had run into the street, shouting David's name. But he was gone. Disappeared. Vanished like smoke. And as the sheriff was summoned, and as the crowd began to spill out into the daylight, I sat there in that emptying church, my wedding undone, my life split in two. That night, we didn't speak much. I stayed in my old room. My mother brought me tea but left it untouched on the bedside. William came by once, only to say, "I believe you." That was all I needed from him. Not explanations. Not apologies. Just belief. The next morning, the sheriff returned with news. David had been found. Hiding in an abandoned boathouse near the inlet. He was arrested without a struggle. And so, the rumors began. The town, once so quiet, exploded into a frenzy. Every porch conversation, every shopkeeper's whisper, every Sunday service, all centered on us. There were those who supported me, bless them. Women who'd been through their own quiet horrors and never spoken. They'd come with trembling hands and say, "You were brave. You did what I couldn't." Others weren't so kind. Some blamed me. Said I had ruined the Reeves name. That I had exaggerated. That I should have kept quiet, married, and spared the shame. Shame. It was everywhere. On my mother's face when she walked to the market. On my father's shoulders as he sat on the porch in silence. On my own skin, like something I couldn't scrub off no matter how hard I tried. But there was also something else. A sliver of light breaking through. Because I had spoken. I had told the truth. And even though that truth cost me everything, my wedding, my peace, my family's standing, it had also given me something I didn't know I needed. A voice. David's trial didn't last long. The evidence, my injuries, the church testimony, the sheriff's account, it all mounted. And though he denied it, everyone knew. Especially when he broke down on the stand, sobbing, and let slip details only someone guilty would know. He was sentenced. Taken away. And that was that. Or so we thought. In the county jail, word spread. Inmates have their own form of justice. And one night, not long after he was locked up, David was found beaten, unconscious. He never woke again. The sheriff came to tell us. His words were careful. There was an incident, he said. These things happen. My father didn't speak. My mother wept. And me. I felt relief. Is that wrong? Maybe. Maybe not. But I knew then I would never again have to fear his shadow in a hallway. Never again have to wonder if he'd be there, watching, waiting. It was over. But the story didn't end with his death. No. Because after the storm came the long, slow work of rebuilding. I wasn't ready to marry William right away. I couldn't. Not while my heart was still so raw. But he understood. Oh, how he understood. He never pushed, never pressured. He waited. And as the weeks turned into months, and the shame began to quiet, I realized I still wanted that life we dreamed of. Not despite the pain, but because I had survived it. When we finally got married, nearly a year after that cursed day, it wasn't in a grand church or under a sea of flowers. It wasn't in front of the whole town, with organ music and lace veils and congratulatory toasts. It was in a quiet field, under a low sky, with just the people who mattered. I wore a simple blue dress. No veil. No bouquet. No train to carry. I couldn't bear the symbolism of the white gown anymore. It reminded me too much of what had been stolen. But what I did carry with me that day was something far more sacred. My truth. My dignity. And William. He looked at me with those same eyes he always had, kind, steady, full of belief. And when he said, "I do," I knew it wasn't to the version of me that had once dreamed of perfect weddings and picture book romance. He said, "I do" to the woman who had survived, who had stood before a crowd and chosen honesty over fear. After the ceremony, we returned to a small cottage by the edge of town. A place where no one came to ask questions or whisper behind their hands. And in that little house, our marriage began. The first year was not easy. I still woke up some nights sweating, shaking, hearing the click of that door lock in my dreams. I still froze at sudden footsteps, flinched when someone touched my shoulder unexpectedly. There were days I couldn't look in the mirror. Days I couldn't speak. But William never once looked at me like I was broken. He'd make tea without asking. Hold my hand when I couldn't speak. Sit beside me and wait, no matter how long it took. And slowly, ever so slowly, the nightmares came less frequently. The tremors dulled. My breath came easier. It wasn't that I forgot what happened. You never forget. It's that the memory began to fit inside me differently. Not as a weight, but as a scar. A scar that reminded me not of pain, but of survival. In 1975, I became a mother for the first time. A little girl we named Clara. I remember holding her, this tiny, perfect thing, and weeping. Not from fear. Not from trauma. But from awe. To think that after all that pain, my body could still create something so pure. It was a kind of redemption. 2 years later, we had a son, Matthew. And our home was never quiet again. The sound of tiny feet on wooden floors, bedtime giggles, the soft hush of lullabies, those were the sounds that began to rebuild my soul. But with motherhood came another kind of fear. Not fear of the past. Fear for the future. How could I protect them from the darkness I had once known? How could I ensure that no one ever harmed my daughter the way I had been harmed? That no one silenced my son the way silence had protected my brother? So I raised them differently. With openness. With honesty. In our house, no topic was off limits. No secret too shameful. No question too big. When Clara turned 13, she asked me why I sometimes went quiet when weddings were mentioned. Why I flinched at loud voices. Why I sometimes stared out the window for too long. I sat her down and told her, gently, carefully, what had happened. I didn't use all the details. Not then. But enough. Enough for her to understand that strength doesn't always look like muscle. That sometimes, strength is just telling the truth when every part of you is screaming to stay silent. Clara looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "I'm proud of you, Mama." And I realized then that the truth I had spoken at that altar, decades before, had not just saved me. It had built the foundation for a home where truth could live freely. Of course, not everyone forgave me. There were members of the family who stopped writing. Cousins who never visited again. People who believed I had ruined David's life, even in death. But I stopped trying to explain myself to them. If someone would rather mourn a predator than stand beside a survivor, then let them sit with their delusions. I had my children. My husband. My truth. That was enough. And yet, sometimes, late at night, when the world was still, I would think of that church. Of the gasps. The stares. The moment my voice echoed through that hollow space. And I would ask myself, what if I hadn't spoken? Where would I be? Who would I be? Would I have lived in a lie, forced smiles on holidays, held my silence at funerals, passed by my brother at family gatherings with a nod and a stomach full of bile? Would I have raised my children in a house with a secret so big it swallowed every moment of joy? No. I know now, with every fiber of my being, that silence is not safety. That protecting the image of a man at the cost of your soul is not loyalty. It is betrayal. When Clara went off to college, she told me she wanted to study psychology. She wanted to work with women. Survivors. People who had lived through what I had lived through. She said, "Because of you, Mama, I know what courage looks like." And I cried. Because in that moment, I saw the ripple effect of one truth spoken. One voice raised. One secret shattered. Matthew, now a father himself, teaches high school history. He once gave a lesson on the power of speaking out, and told his students about a woman, never naming me, who stopped her own wedding to tell the truth about her abuser. His students were stunned. Moved. And one girl came up to him after class, trembling. She whispered, "My uncle did something to me too." And Matthew listened. He told me that night, and my heart broke all over again, but this time, it broke open. Because that girl now had a chance to be heard. Because somewhere in her, maybe, she'd find the strength to speak. Because one story opens the door for another. Because truth is contagious. And so here I am, decades later, sitting on this porch where the breeze smells of pine and salt and summer storms, telling you this story. Because maybe, just maybe, someone watching this has been holding in a truth too heavy to bear. A truth that aches in your bones, that burns behind your eyes, that keeps you awake at night. And maybe this story, as painful as it is, can help you see that your voice matters. That silence is not the only path. That speaking the truth might just be your first step toward freedom. The years passed, and with them came the slow, quiet healing that only time can bring. Our home became a sanctuary not just for our children, but for friends, neighbors, even strangers who needed a place to rest their stories. I hosted Sunday dinners for the widows on our block. I joined the church again, not the one where I spoke the truth, but a smaller chapel across town where nobody whispered behind their hands. I sang in the choir, baked for potlucks, planted marigolds in the front yard every spring. I learned how to live again. And William, my dear William. He stayed by my side until the very end. He passed in the fall of 2019, just before the world grew quiet with the pandemic. He died in his sleep, hand in mine, with no pain, just the gentle breath of someone who'd finished his race. He was 74. We had been married for 46 years. I miss him every day. But what comforts me is knowing there was never a moment in our marriage where I had to hide who I was. Never a single day where I had to pretend. He knew everything, and he loved me fully anyway. That is what every woman deserves. Not tolerance, not pity, but love rooted in truth. Love that sees every scar and says, "You are still whole." My daughter visits me often now, bringing my grandson, Theo, who likes to sit on the porch and ask me questions about the old days. He doesn't know yet what I lived through. But one day, when he's old enough, I will tell him. Not to burden him, but to teach him. To teach him that monsters don't always look like monsters. That family isn't always sacred. That believing someone who says they've been hurt is one of the bravest, kindest acts you can ever offer another human being. My son calls every Sunday. He says, "Mama, you're stronger than anyone I know." And I believe him now. I didn't always, but I do now. Because I've learned that survival is not just about what you live through. It's about what you become afterward. It's about choosing every day to get up and live with truth instead of hiding behind lies. Even now, in this little cottage on the edge of the woods, with my hair all white and my hands not as steady as they used to be, I feel stronger than I ever was as a young bride in a white slip. Because that young girl thought silence was survival. This old woman knows truth is. Sometimes in the evenings, I sit with a cup of tea and replay that moment in the church. The silence, the breath I took, the way my voice cracked as I said David's name aloud. I used to hate that memory. Now, I bless it. Because that was the moment I came back to life. That was the moment I stopped being a victim and became something else entirely. Something unbreakable. Now, I want to speak directly to you, my dear viewer. Yes, you, wherever you're watching from. Whether from a small town like mine or a city that never sleeps, whether you're young and scared or older and scarred, I see you. And I want to ask you something. Have you been carrying something too heavy for too long? Have you convinced yourself it's better not to say anything? Have you swallowed your truth to protect someone who never protected you? Please, don't. Don't let your voice be buried with your youth. Don't let silence rot your soul. Don't let shame win. Because I promise you, the moment you speak, the moment you say it out loud, even if your voice shakes, even if your world changes, you will find something you never expected. You will find your freedom. And maybe, just maybe, your voice will be the one that gives someone else the courage to speak too. We women, we survivors, we are a chain, linked not by tragedy, but by truth. Every link forged by one more story told. One more silence broken. One more grandmother, mother, daughter who refuses to carry the shame any longer. That is why I told you my story. I am Eleanor Reeves. Some call me Grandma Ella. And I lost something on my wedding day I can never get back. But I gained something greater than why voiced my truth. My life. So if you've made it this far, if you've listened with your heart and not just your ears, I ask one small thing. Subscribe to the Grandma Untold Stories channel. Not for me, not for views, but so that these stories like mine, keep reaching the people who need them most. Because somewhere, someone is sitting in silence, waiting for permission to speak. And maybe, just maybe, this is it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to make a cup of tea. Sometimes I still set 2 cups out. One for me. One for William. And when the wind blows just right through the pine trees, I swear I hear him say, "You did good, Ella. You did real good."